1 d4, the Chilean master René Leitlier-Martiner opens with the queen's pawn, choosing a solid and strategic path. This move immediately stakes a claim in the center and prepares for a complex positional game, avoiding the wilder tactical skirmishes of 1.e4. 1 nf6, Bobby Fischer responds with the most flexible and popular reply, developing his knight and preventing white from establishing an unopposed pawn duo in the center. This move keeps all of his options open, signaling his readiness for any of the Indian defenses. 2 c4, white applies more pressure to the center, particularly the d5 square, and prepares to develop his queenside pieces. This move creates a classic central tension and is the foundation for many of the most important queen's pawn openings. 2 g6, Fischer commits to a king's Indian defense setup. By preparing to fianchetto his bishop to g7, he plans to control the long diagonal and create a powerful, long-range piece that will exert pressure on white's center throughout the game. 3 nc3, a logical and strong developing move. Leitlier brings his knight to its most natural square, where it controls the center, defends the d4 pawn, and prepares to participate in the upcoming battle for the initiative. 3 bg7, the king's Indian bishop arrives at its signature post. From g7, this piece becomes a strategic monster, controlling the crucial long diagonal and serving as both a key defender of the king and a potent attacking weapon. For e4, Leitlier establishes the classic big center with pawns on e4 and d4. This ambitious structure aims to seize a significant space advantage and suffocate black's position, posing the main strategic question of the king's Indian defense. For Fischer promptly castles his king to safety. This is a crucial move, removing the king from the center before launching his characteristic counterattack against white's imposing, but potentially vulnerable, pawn formation. 5 e5, an extremely aggressive and committal pawn thrust. Leitlier immediately challenges the f6 knight, seeking to drive it back and gain even more space on the king side, hoping to launch a decisive attack. 5 na8, Fischer's knight is forced into a passive retreat, moving back to its starting square. However, this is a typical king's Indian concept. The knight will wait patiently for the right moment to spring back into the action with devastating effect. 6 f4, Leitlier boldly reinforces his space advantage, creating a formidable pawn phalanx in the center. This aggressive move supports the advanced e5 pawn and prepares to challenge black's kingside, declaring his intention to fight for a decisive attack. 6 d6, Fischer immediately begins the classic king's Indian counterstrike. This pawn thrust challenges the foundation of white's center and aims to blast open lines for his pieces, transforming the position into a dynamic and unbalanced struggle. 7 b3, a solid and logical developing move. Leitlier reinforces his d4 pawn, prepares to connect his rooks, and places his bishop on an active square from where it can control key diagonals and support white's central dominance. 7 c5, Fischer opens a second front. Instead of focusing solely on the king side, he attacks white's center from the flank. This powerful pawn break creates immense tension and ensures the game will be a highly complex and tactical affair. 8 dxc5, Leitlier accepts the challenge and captures the pawn, opening the d-file. He hopes to exploit the newly opened lines and simplify the central tension, but this also gives black's pieces more room to operate and increases the game's volatility. 8 nc6, a brilliant developing move that completely ignores the hanging pawn. Fischer brings his knight to its most active square, placing immediate pressure on white's center and demonstrating that piece activity is far more important than material. 9 cxd6, white captures again, trying to shatter black's pawn structure and expose weaknesses. Leitlier is playing a very concrete game, hoping that his material advantage and passed d-pawn will be enough to secure victory. 9 exd6, Fischer recaptures, opening the e-file for his rook and queen. While his pawn structure is now slightly compromised, his pieces are poised to spring to life with tremendous energy, promising him excellent compensation for the pawn. 10 na4, an aggressive and provocative knight sortie. Leitlier immediately attacks the weak d6 pawn and aims to create tactical problems for black. However, this move leaves the knight somewhat exposed and neglects white's own development. 10 bf5, Fischer immediately punishes the adventurous knight. He develops his bishop with a direct threat, gaining a crucial tempo and forcing the white knight into an awkward retreat. This is a perfect example of meeting aggression with counter-aggression. 11. Ing3, the white knight is forced back, but it repositions to a square where it still influences the kingside. Leadlier is trying to maintain the initiative, but his pieces are becoming slightly uncoordinated in the face of black's precise play. 11. B6, a superb repositioning of the bishop. From e6, this piece exerts immense pressure on white's position, controlling the crucial d5 square and preparing to support the impending assault on the overextended white center. 12. Nf3, Leadlier finally completes his kingside development. This is a much-needed move that connects his rooks and prepares to challenge black's growing control over the central files, but the initiative has already begun to shift. 12. QC7, a powerful and multi-purpose queen move. Fischer places his queen on an ideal square where it puts pressure on the e5 pawn, controls the c-file, and prepares to swing over to the kingside for a decisive attack. 13. QB1, this is a slightly passive and awkward move, forced by black's threats. Leadlier must defend his b2 pawn and move his queen away from the central action, a clear sign that he is being pushed onto the defensive. 13. Dex5, Fischer strikes at the heart of white's position. He resolves the central tension on his own terms, blasting open the position for his better developed pieces and exposing the fundamental weaknesses of white's setup. 14. F5, a desperate gamble. Faced with a crumbling position, Leadlier sacrifices a pawn in an attempt to create complications and generate an attack against the black king. It is a bold, but ultimately flawed, attempt to muddy the waters. 14. E4, a stunning and brilliant counterblow. Instead of simply taking the pawn, Fischer unleashes a pawn of his own as a tactical weapon, dislodging the white knight and creating new, more powerful threats that completely overwhelm white's defenses. 15. Fx6, Leadlier is forced to capture, winning the exchange but opening the f-file and inviting a devastating attack. He has no choice but to enter the tactical storm that Fischer has conjured up. 15. X3, Fischer calmly ignores the loss of material and captures the knight, shattering the pawn cover around the white king. This move creates unstoppable threats and demonstrates the superiority of his attack over white's material advantage. 16. GXF3, white is forced to recapture, but this move further exposes his king to the elements. The white kingside is now a complete wreck, and there is no safe square for the monarch to hide. 16. F5, with calm precision, Fischer solidifies his advantage. This pawn move restricts white's pieces, prepares to activate his dormant knight on e8, and cements his absolute control over the critical squares in the center. 17. F4, Leadlier makes a final attempt to build a defensive barrier, trying to blunt the scope of black's powerful fianchettoed bishop. However, this move is far too slow and only serves to highlight white's passivity. 17. Nf6, the knight that has been waiting patiently on e8 since move 5 finally leaps into the battle. It re-enters the game on its perfect square, immediately joining the attack and targeting the fatally exposed white king. 18. B2, a necessary but tragically late developing move. Leadlier brings his bishop out to defend, but the black attacking forces are already crashing through the gates, and this lone defender is simply not enough. 18. F8, Fischer brings his final piece into the attack with devastating effect. The rook seizes control of the open e-file, putting unbearable pressure on the white position and preparing the ground for the final, decisive combination. 19. Kf2, the white king is forced to flee its vulnerable position, but it finds no sanctuary on f2. This move is a clear sign of desperation, as the king is now even more exposed to a fatal blow in the center. 19. Rex6, the first brilliant sacrifice. Fischer gives back the exchange to completely demolish what remains of white's defensive structure. This powerful blow rips open the e-file and exposes the white king to a direct and unstoppable assault. 20. 1 rupee, Leadlier develops his rook to the critical e-file, desperately trying to challenge black's control. However, this move walks directly into the tactical masterpiece that Fischer has prepared. 20. Re8, Fischer doubles his rooks on the open e-file, creating a crushing battery of power aimed directly at the heart of the white position. The pressure is now overwhelming, and the final sacrificial blow is imminent. 21. Bf3, a futile attempt to parry the immediate threat. Leadlier blocks the file with his bishop, but this only serves as the target for the final, game-ending combination that will go down in chess history. 22. Rex 3, the Thunderbolt. Fischer unleashes a stunning rook sacrifice, tearing apart White's defensive coordination and initiating a forced sequence that leads to a swift and brutal victory. A truly beautiful and decisive move. 22. Rex 3, Leadlier is forced to recapture the piece, but in doing so, he pulls the last defender away from his helpless king. The white position completely collapses, and the end is now just a few moves away. 23. C3, the white king must recapture the rook, but it is a fatal step. The king is drawn out into the open board, where it is caught in a deadly mating net with no hope of escape. 23. QXF4+, the final, exquisite blow. A devastating queen check that simultaneously forks the king and the bishop on f3. White has no defense against the coming onslaught and, faced with imminent checkmate, Leadlier correctly resigned. A true masterpiece of attacking chess. 0-1 White resigns.